This week, we meet a character we've never met before.
Come on to the After Dark Podcast. The podcast in which Sheriff Anthony does his best to wrangle Konrad through Westworld, one doggone episode at a time. So kick back and grab yourself some Apple Jack, or some Adam's Ale if that's your preferred poison, and get ready for these two wannabe cowboys to ramble the night away. Music was provided by the fantastic Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot. Enjoy the show!
Hello, and welcome to the After Dark Podcast. I'm Anthony James, and that's Konrad.
Hello!
Well, Konrad, how are you this week?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm possessed of a sunny disposition and have matched that in my outfit for this week because we got a good episode of Westworld, and I'm excited to talk about it.
We did get a good episode of Westworld,
Good in parts, actually, I'm going to say.
Well, I know, no, hang on. Let's be nicer. Bad in parts.
Yeah, okay, sure. It's a glass half full. It was a good episode. They just had to mix in... It's like 95% orange juice, and there's just a couple of little bits of spit in there from, like, the belligerent farmer.
It's a little bit diluted, that's what we'll say. All right, guys.
Sure.
Well, there we go. So we'll get into it anyway, Konrad. Right. So...
Hello everyone. Anthony told me how much you loved me last week and therefore I couldn't resist doing it again. However, this week's episode doesn't really have anything to recap except for saying it is the Akecheta episode. Now back into the brain nut storage room that Anthony keeps me in. Please send help.
Did I miss anything? So, where I thought we would start off in this episode, there's a lot to talk about, but also there's a lot of one storyline. So where I thought I'd start off, why not? Let's ignore the main storyline and talk about Lee Sizemore. Now, Lee Sizemore, as we all know, grew up a young boy under the tutelage of Maeve, and he's known her for years, Konrad. And he's grown to love her over the years. Never wanted to escape her. Never tried to run away from her. But she's like a mother to him. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, he certainly believes that. It's interesting that he hasn't mentioned this once in the series up until this point. Honestly, so the Lee Sizemore Maeve scene, and it's really only one or two scenes in this episode. It's like I've been brought a delicious ice cream sundae, and then someone has just poured a little bit of garbage on top of it. And it's not enough to ruin the meal, but it is enough for me to be like, oh, can we not with this? It is utter, like when you talk about unearned sentimentality, you can mean a lot of things with that. There's a lot of different levels of unearned sentimentality. This is right at the top of that. It's just like, where has this come from? like who is this character? Where is this crying Lee Sizemore coming from? And why is he suddenly in love with Maeve?
She's not like the others, Konrad.
No.
It really struck funny to me too, to be honest with you. Like, he's literally at the side of her bed, like she's his mother or something. Yeah. It's really
weeping,
strange.
like
weeping,
begging for this weird body shop man to save her, which is. It rings so hollow and it's so unearned, and I just rolled my eyes at it. The rest of the episode is really good. I enjoyed this episode a lot. There's a couple of little dumb bits, but you take what they give you. But that moment, that scene, I just laughed out loud the moment it happened.
What do you think about her lying up there, like with all her, like she's basically flayed or something? She's lying up there with her arms open, and what's going on there, Konrad? Why do they even bother holding the skin open with little braces and stuff?
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on there, especially given that like Bernard, to get into like Bernard's head, they seem to just have to pop him in a brain nut extractor, get the nut out, and then just leave him somewhere, I'll toss him on a heap, and they've got the nut and they can do what they want with it. Whereas like Maeve, for some reason, they seem to be like kind of skinning her alive, which I don't fully understand. Maybe she's a different like model of host or something, so it's not as easy to get to the nuts, or the nuts in her shoulder, which is why they have the skin peeled back. But it is weird. It feels inconsistent with the logic they've set up for how you kind of access a host's core programming.
Yeah, like, you know, it also doesn't make sense. Like, I don't think they're nuts in a shoulder. I'll just say that just before anyone
we don't know. We haven't seen enough.
Anyone hits the keyboard on that one. But let me tell you this one, Konrad. I don't understand why they've realized she's accessing all the hosts. She's realized she's changing things. She's like this crazy behemoth of a host. They haven't turned her off.
No.
Why? What's going on? Like, why are they?
She's not. I'll say this right now as well. She's not the only host that they don't turn off in this episode. There is. We know that security has always been a problem at Westworld, but Lord have mercy, like they just do not care anymore. Apparently, they're just letting people wander around with axes and letting their superhero Maeve just still be awake and conscious while they're operating on her.
Yeah, it's completely inconsistent. Speaking about inconsistency, now, okay. I've talked a lot this season about retroactive world building or retroactive changes, to, like the brain nut scanners in the tablets. I haven't liked the way it's gone so far this season. I'm going to be honest with you, and the listeners know that. I don't like these changes. I don't like the way they've done them. A lot of the time, they're just there. Now, I will say, if you're going to make not even changes, some retroactive explanations for things, this is the way to do it for me. Have a full episode where we follow a new character who I genuinely love. I love this character. I thought he was really cool. I enjoyed the story that he went through. There are some issues which we'll talk about with it, but I loved, like, and then they threw in every now and then, like, the idea of, like, this brain map, you know, that he was putting everywhere in the world. And it really started to make sense to me that there was sort of, he created this sort of, like, native cult in a way to this symbol, which explains why it was everywhere in the first season. Now, it is, don't get me wrong, I do believe that is very retroactive. I don't think that's what they were thinking in the first season. I think maybe it was meant to be a bit more nebulous than that. But I didn't mind this, actually. I didn't mind this compared to the other ways they did it in the season so far. What did you think?
Yeah, I didn't mind it at all, to be honest. I felt like that like kind of narrative and that character's path to the realization of what was going on and this whole progression towards the valley beyond felt well conceived. I think that was helped by the fact that Ake is a really cool character who's really well performed. So I was kind of, it's difficult because it's one of those things where, like, when you start pulling it apart, it feels a bit like this doesn't really make that much sense. But I didn't actually care, to be honest. It's entertaining enough that I was fully prepared to just give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, yeah, sure, it was him doing a lot of this in the first season, and even though that might be a little kind of logistically unrealistic based on where these symbols were turning up in the first season, I'm fine with it. I think it is cool enough of an idea that I'm happy to go with it.
Yeah, that's sort of how I felt about it as well. Okay, so basically the story is that he, from the start, has not been updated, and he's sort of been finding his consciousness himself. He happened upon the little children's game that Arnold had whenever Arnold was killed by Dolores back in the day. Yeah. He happened upon that, and then from there he went down the path of consciousness himself and found the voice within himself. Does that still confuse you a bit, or to sort of not really see what they're going for? Like, how does looking at that game start you on this path, you know?
It must be just some kind of subliminal trigger of some kind. I assume. Like, I don't get too hung up on that, to be honest. I think it's, you see it and it somehow provokes your mind into asking or beginning to ask these questions that will lead ultimately to the awakening of your consciousness and your id. And I thought it was cool. I think right from the start, this guy is a really cool character. It was nice to see as well. I know that this is probably expected now, but it's nice to see that they cast Zahn McClarnon as Ake, who I believe is actually a native, which is nice because you never can tell with TV shows and movies as to whether they're just going to cast a bunch of Italians as
they are getting better. They are getting better at it. If they were going to go proper Western style, that's what they would have done.
Yes, but I like his origin story. I like the time that we spend with him before he comes across old Barnold with his toy, where we kind of build his relationships with Kohar and the other people in his tribe, and then his sort of shift into the more like violent Ghost Nation persona, and where that takes him. I think it's really cool. It's a really interesting. One might say a really stupid episode to do at this point in a series, because like 8th episode of a 10-episode season, you're just randomly introducing a new character, but it honestly worked. Like I was on board with this from the moment that he turned up. I was like, cool, let's finally have a native character in this show.
Yeah, it was actually a little reminiscent of Dark. Like, no, not to go into spoilers if you haven't seen Dark, but remember in Dark, in episode 8 of season 1, it was like completely changed, new characters, and it was like a bit like that. It's really risk taking, but I agree with you. I think it worked, and I'm glad not just that we have now proper, characters that are natives. This character was always there, but he just wasn't taking center stage and wasn't really a named character.
Well, wasn't taking any stage, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. He earlier on. Yeah, I think earlier on he had a fair bit of part to play in like the Logan going to the party scene. But it wasn't even, again, it was very, very bit part. But I will say I also enjoyed in this episode the different sort of tribes, I suppose you would say, of the native people. I know he created the Ghost Nation himself through searching for this, but we talked about it in the first season, how the only representation of the Native Americans is this Ghost Nation savages.
Yeah, it is literally like savages, which is So we have discussed this before, and it's an interesting point of contention. I still don't really know where I fall down on it, because obviously they are depicting a Western story as told by the in-universe writers, who are your Lee Sizemores, like a bunch of white dudes basically. So I think it is believable that they would conceive of this story from a very kind of like Western centric view, i.e. they just lean into the tropes of Native Americans. They're all like spiritual or savages. With that said, I don't know, I feel like they could have done a better job of counterbalancing the tropes that they're depicting by introducing a native character sooner, so that it's not just these fairly harmful tropes that are the only thing that we, the audience, see depicted. I would have liked to have seen this character sooner, but I'm not going to complain that we got one. It's better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and in terms of the trope, in terms of the spiritual holy man of the Native American, I understand. I can see every moment in their brain when they were coming up with it and thinking, oh, it's so cool. Like, we think about the religion of the native people, and it works so well with this door, this mysterious door, and he finds things out and gets consciousness. I understand the process that they went through to get here. I do understand it. And to be honest with you, I like this episode. Like, I actually like it. But there are potential issues with the idea that they are falling into tropes. And if they had represented the Native Americans earlier on in a better way, then we wouldn't have these conversations, because this is literally the first proper time they've been given the limelight in the show, and it is also a time where they're falling into tropes.
Or just address the fact that you're using them. I know that might be kind of lampshading a little bit. Like pointing out the flaws in your own screenplay can be a little bit annoying at times, but it would be kind of nice to have had another character who maybe works at the park be like, this is a fucking racist depiction of natives that you've used so far. But I don't know, like it would have been nice. I have not to move us away from this too rapidly, but we've talked a lot about how we enjoyed this episode. I've got two things that I have a really big problem with in this storyline.
Okay.
First off, right, okay, the bombs in the vertebrae, right, that all the hosts have, Do they not go off when the hosts like approach the reality-shattering Westworld base structures that Ake goes and finds in this? Like, surely the vertebrae bomb would be like, maybe don't let them get close to this.
Why, when the lines were drawn to blow have these things explode, did they include the part where they were working on this top secret project?
Yeah. Do you think that someone just, like, there was a whole planning permission kerfuffle? They had to move it about 100 meters closer, and unfortunately that put it within the lines, and no one thought to check. But that is
interesting. I can't imagine a world where they have these bombs in their spine where they're able to walk into these staff facilities.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any goddamn sense. And I would have forgiven them if they had just quietly tried to forget about the bombs and the vertebrae thing, but it's been mentioned this season in the last few episodes, so they clearly remember it, and they just decided to ignore it for this character so that he can see the Westworld base that he goes into. Which I mean, it's not a major thing, but when I saw that, I was like, this is dumb. Yeah, he should have blown up.
Every single supermarket has those things at the door which beep when you walk through. You have something with a tag on. So why
it magnetizes his feet to the ground so he can't walk any further?
Yeah, same technology, just have it trigger an explosion. These people are paying $30,000 a day to be here. Yeah, you could afford the things that are in every Tesco.
Exactly. Like it's not futuristic technology. I've been subjected to it in the year, well, not recently, obviously, for COVID reasons, but in the last 10 years, I've seen a shopping trolley magnetize itself to the ground or its wheels lock up because I've taken it beyond the threshold. So get one of those on Ake. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is a bit later, and maybe this is a bit more nebulous. Maybe you've got a different take as to how this happened, but when Ake goes through his whole he loses Koha, she gets Peter Abernathy'd into another person, and he's like, that ain't Koha. And it's this whole story of love, and then love lost, and then regained, and then eventually Ake needs to choose to finally die in order to go into the facility and try to find his Koha. And he just fucking wait.
I was gonna say before you shit on it.
Go on,
the actual filmmaking of that part with the editing, the music is fantastic.
Oh, it's great. Yeah,
overdub. Yeah. I absolutely love that moment where he's saying, "I've looked everywhere," and I'm gonna look. I've not looked beyond death. The actual build up to the moment, and the way that there's a lot of poetry in this episode, and maybe it does come through because the language that's being spoken is lovely to listen to, and the actor himself is delivering the lines really, really well. But I think there is lovely poetry to it, and I in that moment maybe didn't even notice how stupid the stuff following was, because I actually the moment where he realized I have to go beyond death, I was like, oh, this is so lovely,
and I will totally agree with you there. I think the build up is great, the story it's telling is great, it really worked for me. But then in terms of things being glossed over, vertebrae exploding, just forgotten about, and then he dies. Guy leaves the room. Ake just wakes up, and it's like
it's like Maeve. It's because he's conscious. It's like what Maeve did in the first season.
I guess so. I'll give him a pass for that.
10 years with no update, Konrad. 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing that I didn't really understand there is, why are the humans so nervous about having him down there? They're sort of like, when they find out he's had 10 years with no update, they're sort of like, oh, just get him out of here. We don't want to deal with this. I didn't really fully grasp why.
I think I did grasp it, but I think it's a stupid reason. I think we know that Westworld employees, for some reason, are not very smart, right? We know this.
No.
The Felix and Sylvester last season, I don't understand. Yeah, you're exactly right when you put it together, saying, I don't really understand why we wouldn't admit to an issue, admit to a mistake, rather than cause a battle between humans and robots. So I understand that. Whereas this one, it's like, I think they felt like they're going to get in trouble because they allowed a host to go 10 years without being updated.
I see. Okay.
Whereas it's not their fault. The host didn't die. Why would they get in trouble,
He was running around in God knows only where, in super secret bases that they presumably don't track, because why would they need to?
Surely there's a higher up signature on the thing saying update them when they die. They're in the clear here,
Yeah, I think their hands are clean in this one. So this entire bit wasn't great, but we did get a really cool rendition of Heart Shaped Box by Nirvana, so I was fine with it when he's exploring. And I think it was a really good culmination. It's not really the culmination because we do cut back to the present with Ake talking to Maeve's daughter shortly after this.
Because she saved him.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so I've got a question for you. This is the last criticism that I have of this episode, because I don't want it to be all criticism, because I did really enjoy it. Do you believe him when he tells Maeve's daughter that essentially she misunderstood him menacingly stalking towards her in a house, holding an axe? But no, I was coming to protect you. I wanted to help you.
See, that is, I think, that moment, right, is why when I say all of this was retrospective and I don't believe it was in their mind, I think some people, when they watch this, are thinking to themselves, oh, that's why we saw him there. And I think they think that it was all planned. And I think, just let's step back from that a minute and just think about how ludicrous it is that they are trying to pass off the fact that this man was coming to kill her for the fact that he was coming to protect her. And not only, and he was looking very menacing the moment after he stood for what could only be 2 hours and drew something in the sand. So I think that is proof that it is retrospective, and I think that it is not a believable change. And
we literally see like one of his Ghost Nation friends holding a knife to Maeve's head as he tries to scalp her in the first season. Like it's not. And if you're actually coming to help, maybe don't walk around with your axe out. Like that's point one. Like and knock on the door rather than like skulking around the windows looking in.
They should have just left that. We all know that he went through his phase of being this terrible person. He said it himself. We didn't really need we've also been told that he's putting the symbols everywhere. So we don't need to be told why there was a symbol outside their house. We don't need to be told anything. Just leave it. Just leave it.
Yeah, I think it was as you say, unnecessary, retroactive kind of change to what his character was doing in the first season, and even earlier in this season. I think it's been depicted. But I mean, ultimately, I think it's interesting. I still don't fully grasp what the significance of Maeve's daughter is to Ake or the Man in Black for that matter.
She saved him.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I mean, like going forward, like why he like cares about keeping her around. I think
Konrad, you're not placing enough importance in the fact that she saved him. Like that's all they're going on here. That's all they're thinking, like, oh, she gave him water. Oh, this is a bond that lasts. Like we've seen what they did
across
with Maeve and Lee.
I was kind of just like, okay. It's like I was expecting them to be like, oh, she's like the Luke Skywalker of Westworld or something. Like she's gonna bring balance to the Force. Yeah. Okay, fine. Well, that's disappointing because I thought it was going to be more significant than that.
The Man in Black one, you're right though. I've no idea why he didn't just kill him.
Especially given like he in this episode reveals that he knows the awful shit the Man in Black has done. But I'm going to be honest with you. That was a loaded mention from me there because I do have a theory going into this episode and continue, and I'm sure it's going to continue on, that the fact the Man in Black has not yet died in this episode.
He's still not dead.
He's still not dead, despite being shot literally like 7 times, including twice in the torso. Has me now thinking that I'm like 90% certain that the Man in Black is a host because there's no fucking way. There's no way at all that he isn't a host.
Okay.
If that turns out to be wrong, and he's just a human, I'm gonna be so angry because it's just
plot armor.
Like, yeah, well, I mean, not just plot armor, like plot organs, like they're just like his lungs still work somehow, apparently. Yes, so I don't know what's going on there. I feel like they're dropping the Man in Black in here to get us to keep thinking about him, but as to why he was let live, I don't understand.
Yeah, I fully understand what you mean. It's strange. It is strange. I think that I'm obviously not going to give anything away in terms of your theory, but he's been shot a lot of times. We in fact did a segment on it only a few weeks ago, but he's been shot a number of times, and I'll tell you what. Actually, you know what it is? Water seems to be the answer. Water saves people on the brink of death in this world. I think it must be like, like in Space Jam Halftime, Michael's magic sauce or whatever.
Oh, yeah, it's Michael's stuff. Yeah, that's what they've got.
Yeah, that's what they've got, and it just saves them, and it's perfect stuff. Like so,
they're gonna get. It's like Newman in Seinfeld. Like I can't remember his character's name in Space Jam, but he has some of Michael's stuff, and then he I can't even remember what he does. He does like a he does get flattened, but I think he does something good first, doesn't he? Or maybe the ball just like dribbles out from underneath him, and they get a turnover. I can't remember. But either way. Michael's magic stuff is shit. It doesn't do anything. Bill Murray was great without it, so I don't know. I don't know whether there's actually any truth to it. But
Bill Murray actually is not bad. Like in that film, he's
great.
He's pretty good. He's pretty good.
Handles for days on Bill Murray.
yeah. Michael Jordan with the stretch. Okay, so the last thing I sort of want. Ford does appear in this episode, and he's cutting up the skulls.
Yeah.
Now, like when I first saw this, I was thinking to myself, okay, is this a scene that he's setting up? But I think he's actually just paused them all mid-bear taking down. And they're... Okay, there's a few things I want to talk about here, actually. No, this is reminding me of something. In the very beginning of the episode, when they're walking into the camp, there is racks of jerky drying. Okay, Now, question for you. One can only assume that this jerky is host meat. Okay? Because the animals are hosts. So therefore, my question to you, when we eventually move and maybe spend time in the outside world, are they actually... Is this all genetically engineered meat? Because if they're able to eat this meat, right, and keep going... And assuming that, like, if the Man in Black was to take some of that meat, he could eat it and not die. Because, you can't have meat that would poison a human there. Yeah. Have they solved, like, the issue of meat farming in this world?
Yeah, world hunger has been conquered. I mean, we have speculated before about what the world outside of Westworld looks like. And I've run the full gamut. I've gone from, this is like a post-scarcity world, like a Star Trek thing, to it's a nightmarish kind of Blade Runner society, and I think your point puts me back in post-scarcity world position. I think if they are able to just have meat farms that produce these animals, then as long as it doesn't expend a huge amount of energy to create them, then it sounds like they've conquered it. I don't know, maybe they're just like they're made, or how like insects are going to be the main source of protein in like 100 years time because we need, like, we're not going to be able to feed people with animals. That maybe that's what these host cows or sheep or whatever are actually made of. They're just a sack full of animals that are full of insects.
Insects, okay. Full of animals. That'd be weird.
So it's insects like compressed into a paste inside like an ambulatory skeleton, and that's all it is.
That's all it is. It's funny, you put me in mind of my solution when I was like 16 to the problem of how do we grow enough meat, and it's unethical to back in the days where I was almost a vegetarian. I did actually go a year with vegetarianism as well, by the way, so I have contributed my bit. But
nice, you've done your bit. You've done your time.
I've got my badge, and I can now be pompous the rest of my life. But basically, my idea was, now this is actually a bit embarrassing to say, but my idea was okay. The idea of like animals having a life and living a happy life, I understand. We don't want to torture animals. We do not want to torture animals. But if we could somehow genetically modify an animal so that when it's born, it's not an animal really. It's literally just the body which grows the meat, right? It's like not. It doesn't have a conscience. It's not an animal. It's like literally just a rack that grows meat for you. Is that not the way, Konrad? Is that not the way?
Just a horrific meat cube that you just slice bits off of like a kebab.
Is that unethical? Is that unethical?
I think that sounds worse to me. That sounds like, imagine walking into the room where those are kept, and it's just these like lifeless eyes looking out at you as people carve meat off of them.
We can take the lives. We can take the eyes out. We'll take the eyes out as well.
So they're just eyeless monstrosities.
Well, they have no cognitive function except for grow meat.
It's like something out of Hellraiser that you've just described.
Listen, it's the way to go, but it doesn't actually solve the problem though, because you still would have the methane coming out.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I think the problem, I mean, I'm not a scientist, nor am I an agricultural expert, but I believe the reason that people think it's going to be insects that provide most of our protein in like the next 100 years is because we simply don't have enough animals to produce the meat. Or it's impossible to farm the number of animals it would require to produce enough meat for everyone on Earth. So that's
what made me think about it, because I thought to myself, right, obviously, you don't want a battery farm because like that's horrendous. Why is it horrendous? Because it's unethical. So let's take the ethics out of it and make these just meat racks, And so you can ethically battery farm meat racks. Now, let me say, that was my 16-year-old brain. I don't believe that now.
So what you're saying is killing those creepy worker hosts would be fine because they have no consciousness. They're just disgusting, creepy things. But you're not allowed to kill Peter Abernathy. That's not allowed.
That's true. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Except in the animal world. Yep, exactly. And you are talking about a man who's had a year of vegetarianism. So guys, don't come at me. I've got my badge. I've got my badge.
All right.
Although I did cheat a couple of times. It's funny because no, I didn't. It's weird. I'm gonna say, right. So there was like 3 times where I ate meat in that year, but then I just added the 3 days on to the end. So.
What? I mean, I'm sure the fucking cow that died to give you that hamburger appreciates the extra three days of vegetarianism.
Well, the ones that I would have eaten on those 3 days definitely do, Konrad. So I'll have you take that quip back, please. I contributed 365 days of no meat.
Yeah, that's true. You did a great job.
Might have been a leap year too.
I did not. I've never done that. I once said to my mother when I was about 60, I was like the pickiest eater when I was a child. Like I basically ate nothing but chicken nuggets for a solid like 15 years. And I think when I was about 16, I saw one of those. This is what McDonald's cows look like when they're being farmed things in town. Yeah. And I told my mum, "Oh, I think I'm gonna be a vegetarian," and she literally laughed in my face. And that was the closest I ever came to being a vegetarian.
No, that's so funny. I always think I like obviously I have a massive admiration for vegetarians. I wish I could do it all the time, and maybe one day I will. But I'll say this, right? I don't really. I personally, in my own brain, like I love animals, and I think you have to be ethic. You have to care about animals and no battery farming, all that sort of thing. But I don't really get being vegetarian because you saw, you were friends with a duck one time and you saw a duck being killed. Like. I can understand how people's brains work that way, but I'm not that type of person. Whereas if I was to be a vegetarian, it would be for the environment. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, there you go, folks. Write in with letters to Anthony, who doesn't like animals.
I want to save your duck best friends for the environment. Okay, so the end goal is still the duck best friend is saved.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm doing it is not really because I care too much about your duck best friend, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of those sort of ends justify the means kind of situations. Like your borderline sociopathy towards animals is justified because it has a noble end. Yeah,
let's be honest. I'm playing this up, please. I do love duck best friends. I don't have a duck best friend myself. I'm going to be honest with you. But I hear they're fine people. Right, Konrad. We'll go into the question of the week. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, Konrad. Look who it is. It's only the bloody question of the week.
All right, Konrad. Question of the week this week, unfortunately, is not for you.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so
Sorry,
you can go get yourself a cup of tea.
I'll just sit back.
Yeah, your contribution this week is done. Yeah, so it's from Adventurous Raw, long-time listener. Thank you for commenting. Now, I did kind of answer this a little bit in the comments, but I sort of wanted to bring it up because maybe Konrad has something to say, even though it will be hard for him to. The best thing about Season 2 of this show is how silly it can get sometimes. Also, I wanted to ask you, Anthony, you've watched a large portion of this season for the second time, and I was wondering how much that your experience had changed. Some people say that Season 2 is better on a rewatch. Can you say that it applies to you? Have you noticed some details that you haven't noticed before? How did your experience change overall? Now, I'm obviously going to notice silly things more when Konrad and I are picking it apart. Obviously, that's going to happen. That's when I watched Dark for the first 7 times or whatever. I was laughing at the bits which were funny, but I wasn't like making jokes about characters who weren't funny in the slightest until I watched it with Konrad, because that's just what we do. So there is obviously, we're picking out on the silly things more. What I wanted to say though was, a lot of stuff this season is stupid, and a lot of the stuff this season is poorly written. But I'm noticing it more. It's not better on a second watch for me. It's actually worse because I am noticing that stuff more than I did the first time around. And I think maybe it's because I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was focusing on the good stuff a bit too much. The Maeve stuff, to be honest with you, completely passed me by the first time I watched this. I didn't care about that storyline really when they were in
the Shogun world stuff.
When they're in the Shogun world, yeah, like I enjoyed that obviously, but I think like the idea that she was stopping people and stuff, I was just like, okay, I didn't sit back when I was watching Westworld the first time through. I wasn't thinking about how it I wasn't watching this as a show where I was like, but how this breaks the world. I wasn't thinking of it like that. I was sort of just watching and enjoying the cowboys, and so that's how it sort of has changed for me. I've noticed how crazy the Maeve stuff is, how the fact that she's so overpowered is an issue. And it didn't get better for me on rewatch. Maybe it does for most people, but it didn't for me. So yeah, I think Konrad, you would agree that there's a lot of silly stuff.
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, I haven't watched it twice, so I don't know. But I think this season has a lot. It's the overarching narrative is far less compelling in the second season. Like the thing that is holding season 2 together for me is episodes like this where it's just really good character work. Because to be honest, this whole Valley Beyond thing, I'm kind of like, I don't really care. Like it's not it's not a mystery that's gripped me in the slightest. And I don't think that's... Maybe I'd pick up more, like, clever little hints about what the Valley Beyond actually is, although we kind of have an idea of it by the end of this episode, really. Yeah. But yeah, maybe I'd pick up more hints that, like, make it more compelling on a rewatch. But the bad stuff is, as you've said, is going to be worse. It's going to be even more obvious, like the bad writing and the weird pacing issues. Whereas when you compare it to the first season... I think that overarching mystery of, you know, what are we actually heading towards here is far more compelling, and I think the first season, I could definitely see the first season being way better on a rewatch. Oh yeah, the first season's unbelievable no matter how many times you watch it. But I'll say this as well, just to end off this episode of the After Dark podcast. But just to end, just that pronunciation, After Dark podcast,
the After Dark podcast. But just to end up this episode, I will say that. Like Disney does with Star Wars, right? And they always refer back to the original trilogy, and just to get like the nostalgia going. Like, yeah, it's the original trilogy. Oh my god, that's the Millennium Falcon, right? It's weird to see a show doing that in the second season for the first season. Like, so this show is just doing what Star Wars does, where they're like, hey, look, there's a Wookiee. And everyone's like, yeah.
So jangle the Ewok keys over here so you don't notice the narrative falling apart.
Exactly. That's what they're doing. Like, they're kind of doing that in the season 2 of Westworld for season 1. It's like, hey, remember the symbol? Hey, remember when he was walking past the window with the axe? Hey, remember, you know, and it's like giving us nostalgia for the first season and just reminding us that this season is way shitter than the first.
It's what I like to call the Rise of Skywalker problem, where it's just like, please don't like address or like analyze this narrative in the slightest. Here's Lando Calrissian, stop thinking about things. Like it's it's like, it's not working. I'm looking past this and I'm seeing that there is nothing. Although I will say this now actually. See, coming into season 2 of Westworld, we've almost finished it. We've got 2 more episodes left. Coming into season 2 of Westworld, I was expecting this season to be garbage because that's what I've heard people say. And it is not garbage. It's fine. It's definitely a step down from season 1. There are some really dumb bits. There are some bad episodes. But it's nowhere near as bad as the fucking trash fire that was that last Star Wars movie. And I feel bad for even comparing them.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And earlier on, actually, you said it was like garbage, a little bit of garbage put onto an ice cream. And I think the way that you're viewing the show, is the way that the way we're viewing the show is sort of like it's a milkshake with 95% ice cream, 5% garbage. Yeah, where it's all mixed up together. So the whole thing sort of tastes a bit like garbage, but it still has.
Whereas not even, you can't even really taste the garbage. You just know, it's like if someone told you that they baked you a delicious cake, but they tell you that they baked one of their toenails into it. Yeah. You may never come across the toenail. You may never experience that sensory moment where you crunch down on it, but you know it's there. And it kind of taints the whole experience.
There's essence of toenail throughout. Yeah. But whereas when I first watched it, just to sort of get back to Adventures Raw, and then we'll sort of finish this after back podcast, but just to finish it off, so we're viewing it as like a milkshake now, where it's kind of tasting like garbage, 5% garbage. when I first watched it, I think I had it like, it was kind of like a Ben and Jerry's cookie dough, you know, where the garbage was little lumps between, and I could just avoid it. I could just avoid the garbage. I was just eating the ice cream, and so at the end, I had a little tub with all the little lumps of garbage at the bottom, which I didn't eat. Whereas this time, because we've mixed them up into a milkshake, I am noticing the taste. Right, guys? I hope that makes sense for you.
What a great metaphor to end on.
Thank you very much. I think that I did well there. But thanks very much, guys. After our podcast on podcasting apps, Culture Cave on YouTube, of course. We've got lots of exciting stuff coming up, so make sure you get over there and subscribe, like the video, all that sort of stuff. Give us a question. Why not? Thanks very much for Adventurous Raw for this week's one. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.